Hi folks. Today I want to show you more about fabric and a lot of what you have to do when you do fabric is soften edges. It's all about edge control for your stroke. So I did a little drawing of a big pile of fabric I have here and I'm going to start in with one of the more dramatic folds. So I'm going to come in here. I've already mixed up a puddle of a low saturation gray-green and a semi-low saturation warmer tone, because the warmer tone is going to respond to the color bounce off the table, because I got a brown table, wood. But the greens are going to be coming off areas of my apartment behind me because I've got a lot of green. Alas, not plants, but the fabrics are green. So I'm looking at this big shadow shape that is wrapping around a fold right in the front. This is a fairly crisp edge that I'm starting with because I want to get this central strong shape. Now I can soften edges later, but for the most part this particular shadow has a kind of crisp shape. It's a little soft right in here, so I can soften that out a little bit. Now that's the big shadow shape. There's another huge one that is poor brush. I've got a bent back hair there. There's another big shadow shape here. Now I've got, for the most part, a single light source, so it's pretty easy to see these light shapes and the shadow shapes. I've marked in where the major folds are in pencil. Now, I'm not working wet and wet. I'm working wet on dry, which means I'm going to have to work fairly quickly to get that softer edge back in there. It may bloom out a bit. That doesn't really worry me too much. But I want to soften this edge. I mean, if I was being very meticulous with my folds, I definitely would not want a bloom edge. But if I was being that meticulous, I also wouldn't be working on a multimedia pad right now. This is a multimedia Canson pad. Now there are some, I'm going to just not worry about getting every last little color bounce. Let me just show you how to get the shape right now. So I'm seeing these two big shapes that are giving me edges for where the shadows are, which indicates where those folds are. Sorry, I just realized that this was not a hard edge. The Canson multimedia, a lot of the multimedias, you can come in there and soften an edge a little bit after the fact. Now this is the bit I really wanted to talk about. When you have the roll of a fabric and you've got the light coming around it, so let me work fairly quickly here, because this edge needs to be soft. Rinse, knock off the excess moisture, and I'm going to push a little more light in here. I am going to come back in and, give a little more oomph to that shadow. But let me just soften out the transition first. some stiffer brushes to do that. So I've been cruising around the YouTubes, looking and seeing if there was somebody else who did fabric demonstrations that I could give all the credit to and avoid doing my own demo. Ha 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 ha. But there wasn't anything that really addressed how to soften these edges, you know. So I'm coming in, the roll of the fabric is in there. Oops, hold on. When you're doing a lot of fabric folds, it's very easy to lose track of which fold is where. And there's a very sharp crease in there. So if there's a sharp crease, let me take a brush that doesn't hold a lot of water. Another one of these Cornell stiff brushes. And it's a fabric that's a kind of creamy fabric, and when you've got a creamy fabric reflecting a creamy fabric, it's going to be a little bit warmer. So let me put that in there. Now let's get this big fold in the front. And soften an edge. Now I could dampen the page first. Certainly if I was working regular watercolor paper, I may choose to do that. I like being pretty controlled with this multimedia paper and not getting too wet with it. So I'll work quickly and soften the edges as I go. Now there's a crisp fold here that has a very sharp edge to the shadow. And then it rides over the fold back there. And again, I can come in with some dense pigment and get a sense of that. So you can see how I'm planning this. You can see how I'm looking at the light and the shadow and how I am softening edges as I go. This has a ribbon of light at the top. There's a little bit of reflected light under the fold. So I can either do this as a glaze, come back in and paint in that darker little bit right in the center. It's right in there that the darker area is. You know, you can come back in with a glaze. That's totally fine and very controlled, but you have to have the patience to do it. Glazes require a bit of patience. You've got to make sure that first layer is dry. Okay. So, coming in here, so you can see I'm immediately moving over here. I just did that, it's very wet, I'm coming back this way. I may come in and soften that later, but that's pretty wet and that's a dry into a wet. It may bloom out right there. Ooh, I don't want that. So let me bring this little dense area back up again. Okay. Well, I was going to move over there. Let's see about softening that since it's giving me an edge right now. Okay. Now, I'll move over here. I'll try not to look over there, and I'll move over here because I don't want to mess with that and get it all muddy with repetitious moves. You know, going in again and again and again with a color is going to make mud if it's all wet. Now, in here, there was a very strong shadow right there. And I want to smooth that out, bring in that strong dark. There, soften that edge. Over here, there's a cast shadow. There's a little hollow in the fabric. There's a strong cast shadow. And I'll come in with that. Now you can take pencil and mark out the line of all these shadows. That's perfectly fine. It's going to give you a lot of lines, but I mean, it's okay. You use a light pencil, you'll be fine. You just have to keep track of what all those lines are. And that can be a little confusing. Even if you have to go one section at a time rather than doing the whole fabric, that's okay. You know, just give yourself a chance to learn this stuff. By rights, I should be putting down these brushes and not holding them all in my hand. I got a wicked bit of tendinitis once from holding too many brushes in my hand at once. It's difficult though, because you want your brushes right there. Rinse, knock off the excess moisture, come in. Another cast shadow over here. And these shadows ride over all these folds and give you a beautiful cross contour, a beautiful sense of how these folds are rolling. Now in here, I'm not letting that go darker green. I'll come back in. Well, I suppose I can do it right now. A little dodgy to do it right now, but while I'm talking about it, in here, it's going to be a little bit warmer because it is an area in the shadow that the light is reflecting off this bit of fold. So it's a cream-colored fabric. It's reflecting a warm light. That light inside that shadow is going to get warm. So let me aim it a little closer at the camera, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Right in there. It might be a little lighter, it might be a little warmer, because it's bouncing off these other folds. The light is bouncing off the other folds, and there's an intensity of the warmth of the color. Now, in here, uh-oh, did I just move that? Yikes. Oh well. We shall see if I can pull this off. I think I just moved my fabric. Or I moved it when I wasn't looking before. Oh well, these things happen. Models sometimes move, fabrics sometimes move. You gotta deal with it. If you want something that is not gonna move at all, work from photos. They don't have quite the same life, they don't have quite the same interest, but they won't move. Okay. Trying to get a dense dark into that soft wet area, just because I want to do that. I want to have a little fluid paint in here. I don't want it all crisp and dense and dry. Okay, now let's see where I am. That needs softening. Pick the stiffer brush, push the color back. So I'm always thinking to myself, does that need softening? You know, do I need to come in quickly, or can I come back later and do it as a lift? Do I know where I'm going with this? Is that fold really there? All of those fun things. So I see this stuff, I see these folds and the way the colors wrap around them because I've done this before. You know, not every painting is going to be fabulous, but I know what to expect. I know what to look for. If you do this, just in some pencil, you know, just, you know, draw a napkin on the table when you're waiting for dinner, you know, as opposed to drawing on a napkin. You can draw on a napkin of another napkin, but just keep practicing this. Okay, I'm seeing a somewhat cooler shadow in here that I'm going to do as a Payne's Gray. There's a little edge here. I'm going to just throw this in. This is not the pencil that I did my initial sketch with. I started with a 4B. I tried to get a slightly darker line so that you could see what I was doing. And that rides around on it. This comes up usually when you have a little fold. The shadow comes in behind it, rolls over it, like that, and there'll be a crisp edge here, and then it may get a little softer over here. You know, the type of fabric that you draw will also have something to say about what kind of softening you use. You know, how far you are from the light will affect how soft those edges are. Do you have one source of light, or do you have two? Oops, oh, I did a drip over there. All of this makes a difference. Now I'm going to just continue that little dense line. So you can see how I'm building this. Now I don't actually have to keep turning the book around because just working fabrics like this can be fairly abstract. At a certain point your hand will get overloaded with pencils, or excuse me, with brushes. Brushes with pencils, depends what you're working with. So, again, I'm looking for those angle changes. I'm looking for where the softening is. Okay, rinse, knock off the excess, soften it. You're always playing with soft edges and crisp edges. Now there is a cast shadow from there. I could just start work on the cast shadow at the same time as the fabric, but I think I'm not going to really do that right now. Juggling too many plates at the same time. rinse, knock off the excess, and just fling in a little tone in there. This is very, very controlled. If I wanted to come in and just start laying in some looser, let's see, this is still fairly pale. Yeah, it begins to get a little bit looser over here. Remember, you don't need focus everywhere. You really don't. Find your moments, work with those. I mean, if you want extra credit, go look at how John Singer Sargent handles fabric. You just have to draw a lot of napkins in restaurants to get that level of comfort. So, let's see. Seeing subtle differences of light to shadow. Very subtle differences. Barely there, versus coming in with crisper, denser color. So in here, I'm now gonna start building up that shadow. Remember, that's fabric reflecting fabric that is fairly warm. I could come in with a little bit of warmth up there, but I'm going to wait for this layer to dry. Rinse, knock off the excess moisture. So I'm getting a little bit more fluid in there. We'll see what happens when it dries. But you can begin to feel the undulations of the fabric. Now this is a stripy fabric. So after I get some of these shadows hinted at, then I'll come in with maybe one or two stripes to show you how the stripes just roll right over the fabric. Or I'll do it. I'll do it and I'll take a photo so you're not like stuck here watching me for forever. I do tend to have a good time with that. So I've got the fabric coming over and then dropping down here. And I'm just able to see a hint of warmth here because that fabric is reflecting some of the table. So I'm looking mainly at value, but also a little bit at the color. And of course there's more of a shadow back in there. Now remember, you don't have to be 100% precise with this because it's fabric. Who knows? Who knows where each little tiny fold is? You know, you can fake it. It's okay. You won't be reported. But you have to know how to fake it. You know, if you change the direction of something, no, you've got to make it work. See, in here, that's going to be a shadow on the table. I'm not going to stress about it going outside the lines. am going to soften this edge a smidgen because there's a little bit of light coming in there. Now I can see over here, in here I'm beginning to get a puddled edge. I really don't want that, so I'm going to go over there in a sec. Okay, there's a little acceleration of white in there, so I'm not going to mess with that. Now in here, let's use some of this cool to give a little bit more emphasis into the dark. Yeah, you don't want it to puddle out, but you do want to soften that edge. At least I want to soften that edge. Not everybody in the world is going to soften that edge. Okay, let's see. Now I need some cast shadows, just because. I really do. And maybe I'll put a little bit of a dark behind there to up the amount of drama in the fabric. You know, nothing like painting light by throwing a dark behind it. So, let's see. Tabletop is over here. Forgive me for changing the angle of the paper. I know you can't see it as clearly. However, if I'm going to do this, I do want to be able to have the right angle for my brush. What am I using brush-wise? I'm using a rather beat-up Scepter Gold. When I press into it, it flattens the brush, and I can use the edge if I so desire. So now, before too much time elapses, I'm just going to give a little bit of a oomph to that tabletop. Notice I'm coming in from the other direction. I think I might even bring that into the fabric a little bit. Ooh, I had schmutz in there. I hate getting schmutz in my paint. Okay, this is a mix of burnt umber and Payne's Gray. I wanted to maintain the value and just change it to a slightly warmer tone. Now, let me, okay, I'm coming up from over here and picking up that little bit. And that's fine. I want that softness. I want that fabric fold fading off into the distance. Even though I can see it's got a light on it, I don't want that edge popping. So you see how I am developing this. This edge is too crisp. So I think for the sake of speed, I'm going to see if I can soften it with a lifting brush. It's a blanket, so a thin blanket. So I can come across it like that and have a soft transition. You know, linen is going to have crisper creases. This fabric is not going to have a crisp crease. Okay, that's softened it a little bit. Okay, and a little bit of the way it comes down from that point. So in here, I'm moving away from the light. I'm going to again soften that edge. So this is just a crappy brush, but it will move the paint around for me, and this is multimedia paper. So we're not talking about a fabulous paper here. I did want that to be a little bit crisper. So let's see if I can pick that up a little. Don't know. I mean, this paper is not renowned for its lifting abilities. But you know, if I wind up abrading the paper a bit, it's okay. Now I could be more fluid with this. I could be tighter with this. Okay, now FYI, I've got a little bit of abraded paper in here. I could torture it right now and really try and get it off, or I could just wait till it dries and then brush it off. Now I'm going to put in a bit of brown for the table in here. Let's see. Oh, I wound up going over some stuff in there that I had wanted. Whatever. There is a cast shadow. I will get around to that in a second. Because you're not going to really see how this sits on the table until you throw that shadow down. And you know what? Remember, this side was a mix of Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber. Since I went over something over here, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a visual mix where I'm going to glaze the Burnt Umber over the Payne's Gray, continue the tabletop over here. And this way you guys also get a chance to see what the difference is between the glaze and the direct mix. So that's the glaze, that's the direct mix, and let's wait for them to dry to really see it. I can come in and make that little corner crisper, but I'm not going to stress about it right now. So I could let this just fade off. There's a bit of table showing, and I think I do like that. So let me get that in there, and you'll be able to see what the fabric is doing a bit better. Feel free to fast forward. You know, I'm showing you all of this. I'm talking my way through it so that you can be aware of what I'm thinking of while I'm doing this. So, let's see, there's one more little bit. In here, it's in shadow, and it makes the curve of the fabric that's in light pop forward a little bit more. So I will put the striping in. I'll do a little bit more on this. Let's see, that's over there. I'll put the striping in without the video on because it's a matter of you just seeing how the stripes will ride over the fabric. But right now, let me just finish up the general sense of light and shadow in here. There's a little roll here. And I'll just tuck in a little bit of dry shadow behind it. Let me pause this and I'll show you what it looks like with this. Just to be honest with y'all, this is what I worked on after I turned the video camera off before. I'll get around to the stripes if I can. Here's the finished piece. I didn't show you going over each individual stripe with the brush because it's pretty boring to watch. They're cross contour stripes. They're building the form. They're lighter in the highlights. They're a little warmer. They're cooler, alizarin crimson in the shadows, say cadmium red, dilute in the highlights. But otherwise, they're just cross contours going over the form of the fabric, giving it a little bit more distinction.